Maybe close the door behind you. Lock it if you have to. Turn the lights down. Sit down and promise me you won't let anyone else read this. This is the kind of thing that needs to live in a room with its own breath. No audience, no interruptions, just the quiet so the words can land where they're meant to. I say that because what I'm about to tell you isn't pretty or neat. It's raw. It's honest. It's the part of me I kept tucked away, like an apology I never learned how to give. I used to think silence was safety. I thought if I didn't speak, I wouldn't have to explain the places I'd failed. I thought hiding the truth would protect the people I loved. And maybe, for a while, it did protect them from the mess. But silence didn't protect you. It only made me safer from you. And that's the cruelest theft I ever committed. You gave me your presence like a promise. I answered with absence like a refuge. That's the confession. I chose comfort over courage. And in doing so, I taught myself how to lose the one thing I wanted to keep. Do you remember the night we first stood on my balcony and watched the city breathe? You were so small in the cold light, pulling your jacket closer, laughing at nothing. And the way you looked at me, like I was the only person who mattered. I swore I would never waste that look. I said that to you out loud. You believed it. I believed it, for a while. But belief without action is a lie wrapped pretty. I let my fear keep me from being the man who would speak your name in a crowded room. I let the people who didn't know you shape the story I told about us. And because I was too proud to fight, I let the narrative crumble around us. The most painful part is how ordinary it all felt while it was happening. There was no single explosion, no cinematic betrayal, just 1,000 tiny abdications. A missed call when you needed me, a promise postponed, a defense I didn't write when words were needed the most. You sat with me through nights I couldn't admit I was falling apart, and instead of being brave for you, I tried to be brave for everyone else's approval. I chose their eyes over yours. I chose the quiet whispers of people who didn't know your worth, rather than standing beside you and saying your name like a commandment. When your name was spoken in the wrong room, I clammed up. I let others speak for me. I let strangers weigh in on the thing that was only ever mine to protect. That door I told you to close, I should have been the one to lock it. Instead, I slept with it propped open and let the weather come in. And when the storm arrived, when the accusations were thrown, when memories were bent into weapons, you sat there and absorbed it. You didn't counterpunch. You didn't create scenes. You held your dignity like a fragile thing and paid for my silence with your patience. There's a moment I go back to in my head every night, and it's the one thing that keeps me honest. It wasn't dramatic. You were in my kitchen, half asleep with a cup of tea cooled to the same temperature as the regret in my chest. You looked up at me, tired but steady, and asked the only question you needed an answer to. Do you see me? It felt like an anchor. I wanted to say yes 1,000 times. I wanted to shout it across the room, but instead I answered with a shrug and a half-truth about being busy. That memory eats at me because in that second I taught you what to expect from me. Words that could be bent, promises that could be delayed, devotion that could be negotiated. you, brilliant and brave, tolerated that. You tolerated the inconsistency the way a gardener tolerates a late frost, because you believed the season would come right again. What I didn't tell you then, and what I am finally telling you now, is that your quiet was louder than any argument. Your patience was louder than any accusation. The way you kept the door closed in moments when the world was trying to crowd in, that was love, spoken differently. And while I misread that as indifference, the truth was the opposite. You were building a sanctuary, one small act at a time, and I walked around it like I didn't see the shape of a home forming. Shame sits with me these days like a second skin. I feel it every time I find an old message from you and do the physical thing of scrolling past it like it's a file I don't want to open. I feel it in the way my hand hovers over your name and then lets the phone fall back into my pocket. I feel it in the late nights when I replay conversations, imagining how different one sentence, one defense, one public pronouncement, one simple standing would have changed everything. It's a heavy kind of grief, not for what I lost, but for what I caused to be lost. I'm telling you all this because the first part of rebuilding starts with truth. If I wanted to keep the performance going, the polished apologies, or the well-timed grand gestures, I would have stopped here and dressed my regret in poetry. But this is not for performance. This is for you. For the part of you that learned to be small, so the rest of the world wouldn't bully you into disappearing. For the part of you that still believes in me, even when I was late at loving you. For the way you let your heart risk everything on someone who wasn't always worthy. Do I promise you this? I will learn to say your name where it matters. I will be the one who closes the door when the noise comes. I will stand up in rooms where people talk, and I will not let their voices rewrite the story you and I lived. I will not let cowardice be the language of my love. I will not hide you to keep my life easy. If you can still hear me from behind your closed door, know this. I'm working, not with speeches or fireworks, but with small, consistent things that prove I'm different. I will show up at the table when I say I will. I will speak for you when your name is dragged through a place it doesn't belong. I will build the slow, steady life you deserve, the life that makes it impossible to wonder if you're enough. When I said, don't open this unless you're alone, I meant it. Because the truth I gave you now is a private thing. A repair that starts in quiet, not on camera. But if you feel anything reading this, if some small part of you recognizes the man I used to be and the man I am trying to become, type one thing for me. Something only we would understand. Just write door in the comments, so I know you read it in the right room with the door closed. And that maybe, for the first time in a long time, we're starting from the same silence. Baby, close the door again if it creaked. Sit down, lean back. I need more of your attention for this one. Because the next part isn't just memory. It's the moment the world changed in front of me, and how that change started to stitch the parts of me that had been falling apart. There was a day when the truth walked into a room wearing someone else's intentions. My ex came over like she owned the air, like she had permission to retell every private thing between us, as if it were public property. She didn't come with questions. She came with a script, She came with screenshots and loaded memories, and underneath everything was a thin, dangerous smile that suggested she enjoyed being able to wedge herself back into our story with a hammer. It felt like watching old footage of a life I thought I had edited out, except now the footage was being narrated by someone who wanted to make me the villain. I remember standing there, hands jammed into the pockets of the jacket I used to leave on the chair, while she spoke. Her voice filled the living room in a way I'd never let myself imagine anyone else's voice filling it. She told the version of events that made me small. She told the story that made you look like a ghost in the margins, like a mistake I was trying to justify. People listened. My mom listened. My breath got shallow. I could feel my whole history folding into whispers, and seeing it happen, I wanted to rise up. I wanted to cut her off. I wanted to throw the truth on the table and watch it burn the lies away. But what I did instead was the thing I regret most. I stayed silent until my mother didn't. She is a woman who learned her lessons the hard way. She has a way of carrying judgment like a folded newspaper, hitting only where it matters. She looked at my ex like someone who had been lied about too many times, and she said what I should have said. She didn't raise her voice like a courtroom. She simply spoke with a calm that landed like thunder. She defended you, not with anger, but with something steadier, recognition. She spoke of the nights she'd watched me change, of the quiet way my shoulders softened when I spoke of you, of the way my laughter had become honest in your presence. She said, "Do not reduce her to your version of a story. I have seen what she gave him. That was seismic. The air in the room shifted like a tide. My ex blinked like someone whose map had been revoked. I felt like someone had opened the door to my heart and let a current through that I hadn't known was stuck. I was stunned, not because my mother defended the woman I loved, but because she saw something I hadn't been brave enough to name for myself. And in seeing it, she named me too. She named the man I could be, the man I had already started to become when love steadied me. After she said those words, there was this strange hush. Not the empty sort, but the kind that makes you sober. It's the hush where you feel the distance you've created between who you were and who you are becoming. I broke then. It wasn't dramatic. I left the room and sat on the stairs because I needed to let the sound of her voice turn into something permanent in my memory. Tears came, not loud, not theatrical. They just arrived like evidence. They were the confession I couldn't have voiced before. I had failed you by being silent, and that silence had become a slow betrayal. You need to understand what that silence did to you. It didn't only make you feel alone. It made the people around you think silence was the story they could accept. They mistook my quiet for consent. They filled in the blanks with versions of my life that suited their own fears. I watched my own absence be used as currency by people who wanted to win an argument or feel superior for being realistic. And you sat there, dignified, while I let the currency change our worth. After that day, my mother and I had this long talk. We didn't raise our voices. We sat with mugs that had gone cold and spoke the way people tell each other, the facts of a life they are trying to repair. She told me things that hurt because they were true. She said she had seen me become softer, kinder, more patient. She said she'd seen the way I woke up for work with a brightness she hadn't seen in years. She said she noticed the small rituals I started, ways I took better care of myself because someone else's presence made me want to be better. She said, "You looked different. You seemed like you had a reason to be brave." Hearing that from her felt like someone lending me a mirror I had avoided for years. And then she asked me the question that changed everything. Why did you let fear become louder than that? I had no real answer. I had excuses. I had rationalizations. I had every small, clever reason to justify the cowardice. But none of it explained why I didn't step forward when it mattered. She didn't lecture me. She sat with me and peeled the layers like an onion until the truth was the only thing left in the room. She said, "If you wanted to protect what you had, why didn't you stand for it?" That line echoed. It still echoes. It taught me that protecting love isn't passive. It's messy. It's noisy. It's visible. That's when I saw the real cost of my silence. It had taught you to expect less. It had conditioned the space between us into a place where you had to prove your worth every day, rather than being celebrated without fanfare. It taught my family to see you as optional, and my ex to see your worth as a target. And worst of all, it taught me to doubt my own courage. I had been acting like a man who believed love was something to be negotiated gently, in private, rather than declared with integrity in public. So I started to make changes that felt ridiculous in their simplicity. I began saying your name to myself again, until it felt like a prayer and not a risk. I started answering the phone at odd hours, because I remembered you once called simply to say you loved the way the rain sounded on the roof. I stopped letting other people's stories about us be the loudest version of our story. When someone spoke poorly of you, I no longer let my silence be a passive agreement. I corrected it. I spoke up. It felt clumsy at first, like learning to walk on a leg that had been asleep for years. But it was necessary. Those are the small acts that rebuild trust. They're not the cinematic speeches the movies sell. They're the quiet, repetitive choices that show up day after day. I learned to be present in rooms where I used to shrink. I practiced saying, "She is not what you say she is." And I felt the steadiness of my voice grow. And with each small correction, something in the air around me changed. People stopped assuming the worst. My mother started to look at me with that particular softness of someone who watched her child choose differently. My ex. She began to shrink back because she realized she no longer had the easy leverage of my silence. But even as I rebuilt from that day, there were consequences I had to face. There were things you had already felt that couldn't be undone by words alone. There was the time you had to leave the room because it was easier to protect yourself than to wait for a man to become brave. There was the quiet gap that formed in the places where trust should have been seamless. I've carried those moments like weights. I know I broke your rhythm. I know I made you question your judgment. Those are debts I am paying back with steady, intentional acts that are small, boring, and necessary. Now, here's the thing I want you to hear. Defending you publicly was the first honest action. It forced me out of my hiding. It forced me to become the man who could not let someone else's narrative replace the truth that lived between us. But defending you once is not a retirement plan. It was the wake-up call. The work that followed was the real test, and I am still being tested every day. It's a discipline. It's doing the small, obvious thing instead of plausible excuses. It's showing up when your friends ask about you and doing it without a script. It's making a choice before someone else writes one for me. If you read this and feel something stir, an ember that remembers, then know I am moving with intention. I'm not perfect. I miss sometimes. I stumble. But my course is true now. I will choose to speak for you in rooms that used to hum with gossip. I will go to the places where your name gets chewed on, and I will offer a different flavor, a simple, consistent, reverent truth. I will build a life where your dignity is protected, not because it's convenient, but because it's demanded by how I've decided to live. I know some people will say it's too late. Some will say the damage is done. They might be right about some things, but there are measures that can't be fully quantified. The way a man shows up daily, the way he defends in private and in public, the way his actions become boring in their steadiness and therefore trustworthy. That steady boringness is my new aim. It's how I will prove that the defense my mother offered that day wasn't a one-off miracle. It was the beginning of a different life. Read this slowly. Let it sit. If one thing from this part matters to you, type a word we use to keep between us, not to start anything grand, just to let me know you're there in the same room, with the same door closed. Type still if you felt the moment when my mother stood up and named what you were to me. Type door if you read this, where the world couldn't interrupt. If nothing else, hold the memory of that room with me for a while, because I am building from it. Every day, one quiet, deliberate act at a time. Baby, close the door again. Sit back down. Take a breath deep enough to hold the whole room. This next part is where the quiet work begins. The slow, unglamorous repair that doesn't make for headlines but changes the weather inside a home. After my mother spoke and after I finally stopped letting other people tell our story for me, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. Saying your name out loud was one thing. Learning to live like I meant it was something else entirely. The first weeks after that day felt like learning to walk on a foot that had been asleep for years. My body remembered old habits faster than my heart could retrain itself. I caught myself pausing at the doorway, thinking I should have the right answer ready for anyone who asked about you, and then realizing no one else's opinion mattered anymore. I found myself rehearsing the simplest sentences. She is kind. She is brave. She is not your story to tell. Until they stopped sounding foreign in my mouth. Those sentences turned into anchors. I whispered them to myself on the subway, in the car, in the quiet between meetings. I said them when old friends made small, careless jokes. I said them when I scrolled past a message from you and wanted to hide. There were practical things too. I deleted habits that made it easy to disappear. I stopped leaving my phone unanswered for hours as a way to preserve a private life. I stopped saying I'll call you later with no intention of calling. I started keeping the things I promised. Small, boring things like showing up on time, sending a message when I said I would. Not canceling plans for flimsy reasons. You taught me that love survives on the small agreements, not the grand gestures. I had respected your patience in the wrong ways. I honored it now by matching it with steady, unflashy truth. But this wasn't a straight line. There were retracings, apologies that needed repeating, and nights when shame rose like a tide and wanted to sweep the whole attempt away. I remember a day when I thought I had done enough, when my chest felt lighter and I caught myself smiling at a memory of us. And then I heard a voice in a group chat make a dig about that girl, and I froze. My instinct was still to shrink, to let the noise pass. But then I saw the shape of your patience in my mind, and I spoke up. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a simple correction. She's not that. She's the reason I'm different now. The person went silent. It felt small, but that smallness stacked up into bravery. There were also moments of real reckoning, times when you tested what I was building. I asked you to come over, and you hesitated in a way that said everything. You asked for space, and I almost panicked, because old patterns would prefer panic to patience. Instead, I sat with what felt like an absence, and practiced being present without pressure. I learned to accept your silence as a form of communication rather than a threat. I learned to pay attention to the things you didn't say. The way you left a mug in the sink 2 days in a row. The soft edge in your laugh when you guarded yourself. The way you didn't reach for my hand the way you used to. Those were the real tests. The world doesn't notice them. The cameras don't capture them, but they're everything. I also had to confront the ways I had let other people's fears sit in my chest, like unpaid rent. Friends who favored drama, family members who preferred certainty to nuance. They all had opinions and they all wanted me to justify my choices. I stopped justifying. I started asking for what I needed instead. Please don't speak for us. Please don't forward those messages. Please don't reduce her to a rumor. It was harder to ask for boundaries than it had been to keep my mouth shut. But each time I asked, the shape of my life changed a little more toward honesty. People either adjusted or receded. That was okay. Some distance was necessary for a new kind of closeness to grow. One night, I found myself in the place where we used to lie awake and talk about ridiculous futures. Houses with ridiculous paint colors, vacations we couldn't afford, made-up holidays where we'd celebrate one another. I sat there alone with the memory of how you used to say my name in the dark. And instead of running from that ache, I let it teach me. I wrote you a letter not to be sent, just to hold my thoughts in order. I wrote about the things I was changing and the things I still needed to change. I wrote about the ways I would prove my commitment, not with speeches, but with the everyday rituals that say, I remember you. Writing that letter was like setting a quiet appointment with myself. It reminded me that repair is a series of small promises kept. Here's the honest part. Healing other people's wounds takes time because you're also healing the part of yourself that caused the wounds. Some days I move forward 3 steps and slide back 2. I miss calls. I forget a date. I flinch when a memory I'm not ready for appears in a conversation. You deserve someone who meets you without the baggage. I'm trying to be that man. I fail in ways that feel fresh and old at the same time. But the difference now is, I see the failure. I don't hide from it. I get up. I apologize. I do the work. And there's one more thing I keep returning to. The way my mother looked at me after that day. It wasn't just relief. It was recognition of a new gravity in me. She started to ask about you in ways that were gentle, like someone testing the water and finding warmth where they expected chill. That shift told me I wasn't the only one changing. When family begins to see what love taught you, it becomes easier for everyone to step into that new story. That doesn't erase the times I hurt you. It just makes a wider field for the work to grow. If you're still reading, if your door is still closed, and you're still holding a private space for this, leave me one small sign. Don't make it big. Don't make it public. Type the one word we once kept between us. Let it be a private signal that you're there, that the quiet you offered me then is the quiet I'm trying to honor now. Type still if you read this in the right room with the right light. Type door if you sat down just like I asked. Whatever it is, I'll know. I'll answer the way I should have from the start, with the small acts that become ordinary and therefore true. Baby, close the door one more time for me. Sit down, put your feet up if you want, and let the room hold us. This part is where I stop explaining and start confessing the things I could never say in front of anyone. The small, ugly truths about how I failed you. The quiet promises I'm finally making out loud. And the way the ordinary parts of my day are being rebuilt around the idea of you. I need you to know something plain first. I wasn't brave enough when bravery mattered. Not once. I hid behind plausible reasons. Work, stress, timing. I need to get myself together. Those were all excuses for cowardice. Real courage would have been messy and loud and public. Real courage would have been me saying your name in rooms that didn't want to hear it. Real courage would have been defending you when it was inconvenient, not when it was convenient. That is the truth, and it sits in me like a stone. Baby, you used to do the simple things that made me better without even trying. You would lift a plate from the sink, fold a blanket, say you okay, in a way that found the part of me I thought I'd lost. You kept small lights on for me, texts at odd hours, a playlist when the city felt too loud, a message that said, I saw you today. Those tiny lights were building a home around me. I walked through that home like a stranger, thinking I could always come back and collect what I needed later. I was selfish and patient all at once. I thought if I'd delayed, I was being careful. I was only delaying my own becoming. There were nights I would stare at my phone and imagine you reading something I had written and smiling, and then I'd throw it away because pride told me to be silent. Pride kept me from saying things like, I'm sorry, in ways that needed to be said, not once, not on a loop, but in a way that changed how I moved. Shame taught me to hide. Pride taught me to perform. Love, the kind you gave me, teaches you both shame and pride can be renounced. It teaches you to kneel and then stand, and to hold both in a chest that knows how to let go. I'm telling you now that I have started letting the ordinary show the devotion I couldn't speak. I buy the coffee you liked, the way you liked it, not as a gesture to show off, but as a small habit that remembers you. I keep my calendar because being on time for you is the easiest way to show respect. I answer the phone because being reachable is how I sign a quiet contract with you every day. These are not cinematic. They are not a melody for views. They are the work of someone learning to be reliable when reliability once felt threatening. That is what repair looks like. Boring, repeatable, relentless. Baby, I remember the first time I corrected someone who disparaged you. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was overcompensating for years of silence. I expected resistance. Instead, I watched them tilt their head and realize I meant it. That small correction was the first brick. Then I started doing it again and again, and with each repetition my voice steadied. It became easier to say your name without it feeling like an admission of weakness. It became normal to defend you. And normal is exactly what love needs to survive the long seasons. There are still nights when I fail. There are mornings when I forget an anniversary or let a call go unanswered. When that happens, I do not hide. I own it quickly and tangibly. I don't just say, "I'm sorry," and leave it at that. I fix the small things I broke. I replace the habit I relied on with the better one. I make the call I should have made the night before. I show up with food when I said I would. I send that text that says, "I remembered." You deserve that kind of repair, not drama, but consistency. Baby, one of the hardest parts I had to learn was how to let you be guarded without turning that into my panic. When you asked for space, my first instinct used to be fear, then begging, then bargaining. Now I sit with it. I practice patience the way a craftsman practices a skill, daily with humility. I write notes to myself, reminding me that space for you is not a punishment for me. It's your language. It is not my job to fill it with urgency. It's my job to be steady enough to wait without resentment. I also learned to make my apologies count in public. When your name comes up and someone tries to minimize what you gave, I do not let the moment pass. I stand and say things that are awkward at first. She loved me better than I deserved. She asked for honesty and I gave her silence. Those sentences are uncomfortable. They strip the actor off my chest, but they also let the people who saw me fail know I'm choosing differently now. There was a day I found one of your old notes tucked into a book I hadn't opened in years. It was a single line, something casual and unguarded that you'd scribbled and slipped in for me. It felt like a small hand reaching through time. I cried in my car because I realized how long I had been careless with the treasures you left me. I pulled the note out, folded it again, and put it where I could see it every morning. That little ritual is not to punish myself. It's to remind me of what I nearly lost and why keeping it matters. Baby, I know words can feel like air if not tied to action. So here are the things I am doing that you can measure. Regular messages that show up without being asked. Scheduled calls where I don't cancel. Public corrections when people gossip. Honest conversations about my own faults without spinning them into excuses. Volunteering time to show I can give more than I take. And small, weekly check-ins where I ask you how I'm doing and then actually change. These aren't promises to be perfect. They are promises to be present. If your heart still listens after all of this, if you still feel that familiar small pull when my name appears on your screen, give me a soft sign. Type the one word we used to hold in private. Say door if your door is closed and you read this in silence. Say still if a part of you remembers the kitchen lights and the quiet mornings. I'll take that as permission to keep building, even if it's slow, even if it's hard, even if it takes the rest of my life. Baby, I choose you today, not with a speech that fades, but with the steady, dull, sacred labor of showing up. This is how I will love you now. Small, consistent, boring in the best possible way, and loud exactly where it needs to be. Baby, stay with me a little longer. Don't let your finger scroll past this one. Close the blinds if you have to. This part is where I stop promising and start naming the real things I'll hold sacred. The small liturgies, the guardrails I'm setting, so the past can't slip back in and steal you again. It's where the repair stops looking like a speech and starts behaving like the life I owe you. I want to tell you exactly what I do when I think of losing you. I don't dramatize it anymore. I catalog it. I make lists that are quiet and practical. Who to call if someone tries to smear your name, which friends actually listen and which ones gossip, the times of day when you're most likely to need a check-in, the little household habits that make a house feel like a home instead of a waiting room. It sounds clinical, but for me it became holy. It's how I turned panic into practice, and practice is what remakes a man. There are boundaries now that I didn't have before, not to punish you, but to protect you. I stopped forwarding messages that could hurt you. I stopped retelling private things as anecdotes in bars or group chats. I told the people who like to make mountains out of molehills to stay out of our history. I said plainly at once, if you can't say something kind, don't say anything at all. I meant it. Some folks adjusted. Some didn't. The ones who didn't, they're quieter now because I finally learned how to close the door and keep it closed. Baby, I learned how to be jealous of the right things, not of the way you look at someone else, but of the way you spend your sacred time. I protect your time like it's a currency that can't be wasted. That means I don't fill your calendar with noise. I don't ask for explanations when you're quiet. I don't expect instant answers to everything. I respect the hours you guard for yourself, the way I should have from the start. That respect is a love language I practice daily. I've also learned to make space for your anger without turning it into my defense. When you get quiet and your jaw tightens, I used to panic and explain away my absence. Now I sit in the stillness and listen. I let you have the space to be heard without trying to fix it with a pretty story. I learned how to apologize before I explain. I learned how to put my hand where my mouth used to be. Those small changes make the difference between a man who's rehearsing guilt and a man who's actually changing. There are nights when the old shame presses up against the work I'm doing. It's like having someone whisper old lies into a new conversation. When that happens, I reach for a list of truths, the exact things you did that proved your depth. The moments my mother named you as someone who healed him. The notes you left that I keep folded in a book. I read them out loud sometimes, not to anyone else but to myself, like a litany. It keeps me honest. It reminds me what I'm building toward, and I'm building toward a life where your dignity is obvious. That means I don't hide the nature of what we had. I don't let it be minimized by short jokes or whispered doubts. If someone edges a story into a place where your name feels small, I speak. If a conversation turns to gossip, I change the subject with clarity. If someone tries to make you the plot twist in their narrative, I redirect them to the truth. It's not performative grandstanding. It's making sure the small, day-to-day things line up, so there's no room left for revisionism. Baby, I started ceremonies that are not for show, simple rituals that say, "You matter." I leave a note where I know you'll find it. I text the dumb things I promised to remember. I schedule a check-in so I don't rely on my memory or my mood. I show appreciation publicly in small ways, a call out when you do something kind, praise in front of friends that doesn't feel forced. These rituals don't erase hurt, but they do create a steady atmosphere where hurt can heal, because the air isn't full of doubt anymore. There are practical commitments I've made to myself and to you. I'm in therapy, not as a headline, but as routine maintenance. I talk to someone who holds me accountable for the ways I avoid responsibility. I read books about attachment and communication so I can stop guessing and start learning. I practice breathing techniques so panic doesn't run the show when you ask for space. I set alarms for weekends so I don't schedule myself away from the very life I claim to want. These aren't flashy. They're the scaffolding. Most importantly, baby, I've learned to keep my promises small and frequent. I used to think big gestures would redeem everything. They don't. What redeems is repeatability. It's showing up 3 times before noon because you need evidence more than drama. It's apologizing in public when I slip and fixing it in private when I can. It's choosing you in conversations where the easy option would be to let the rumor take root. Instead, and let rumor take root, it's choosing rest with you over restless excuses that used to fill my evenings. If your heart is even a little open, please leave me a quiet sign, not "come back" or "let's jump in," but a single word that says you read this with the door shut and the lights low. Type "still" if the ember is warm. Type "door" if you read this in the way I asked. Type "shelf" if you understand the small rituals I keep now. Any of those things will be my map. I won't rush you. I will keep building. Baby, I choose to be steady. I choose small, relentless fidelity. I choose the boring things that make love last instead of the fireworks that fade. I choose to keep your name sacred in my mouth and my deeds. I don't promise perfection. I promise persistence. And if you give me the quiet invitation, not the fanfare, not the headlines, just the closed door between 2 people, I will prove it to you in the slowest, truest way I know how. Baby, one more thing. Before you set this down, sit back, breathe slow, and let me finish the part I never knew how to say without sounding like I was pretending to be holy. This is the part about accountability, not the vague kind people use to look good on camera, but the gritty, daily kind that pulls your life into a new orbit. If the other parts were about remembering you, this is about rearranging my whole life, so remembering you is automatic, not optional. I started by naming the patterns I'd hide behind. Wasn't enough to say, "I'll try harder." I had to map the exact moments I default to distance. After arguments, when I'm embarrassed, when the praise I want doesn't come fast enough. I wrote them down like a confession and left the paper where I could see it when I woke up. It's a small thing, but seeing the list every morning forced me to meet the man who made those choices. You taught me that honesty is a muscle, and muscles only get stronger with repetition. Then I set rules for myself that felt almost childish at first, but they work. No leaving the house without sending you a quick message if we had plans. No scrolling past your name as if the chance to connect could wait until my mood suits me. No letting off a cancel with Something came up, when the truth is I chose something easier. That last one was the hardest, admitting I'd prefer convenience over the work of loving you, but naming it changed the scoreboard. It made daily choices sharp instead of fuzzy. I also learned the hard magic of making amends out loud. I used to apologize and tuck the apology away like a receipt I'd never show anyone. Now, when I mess up, I own it where it matters, not to earn applause, but so the people around us know I am not the man I used to be. Public humility isn't about show. It's about demonstrating that I will not hide the cost of my mistakes. When someone asks about you and the rumors start, I don't fold, I correct. When an old friend jokes about our past like it's entertainment, I stop the conversation and shift it. Those are small, visible acts, but they glue back what shame tore loose. There's another layer people never talk about. Forgiving myself so I can actually be dependable. Shame can turn a man into a hollow echo. He knows he's failed, but he hides in failure like armor. I had to do the work to forgive what I'd done so my apologies could breathe. That meant therapy sessions that felt like pruning away dead limbs. It meant sitting in silence with the parts of me that are still selfish and saying, I see you, without letting the selfishness run the room. It's slow, it's ugly sometimes, but every pruning makes room for something that lasts. You deserve to know the tangible things I rearranged around your name. I rearranged friendships that thrived on gossip and put distance from people who fed off my silence. I stopped being the safe place for others to dismiss you. Hey. I rearranged money priorities so I could afford small rituals that mattered. A weekend reserved for connection. A tiny fund for spontaneous tickets to do both dumb and beautiful things together. Not as gestures, but as a way to choose you consistently. I rearranged my mornings to include the simple habit of gratitude, naming you first before the noise of the day. Because loving you out loud in private trains my chest to be brave in public. And sexual trust. We need to talk about that without pretending it's tidy. I used to let intimacy fill the gaps I should have filled with conversation. That was unfair. It asked you to heal me with your body while I refused to heal my heart. Now the steps I take are clear. Consent is conversation. Presence is more than being in the same room. Repair includes tenderness that isn't transactional. I learned to separate need from love in real practice, not just in self-help lines. I call it learning to love you without expecting you to fix me. There were nights I still failed, moments when old reflexes made me quiet, moments when I should have stood taller and I didn't. When that happened, I did something small but sacred. I wrote the exact failure down and what I would do differently next time. No grand promises, just a plan. Call within the hour, show up at the next planned time, public correction if necessary, and a specific, practical way to rebuild trust around that exact offense. These micro repairs add up. They are the ledger I keep against my old ledger of excuses. I also wanted you to see I wasn't just changing for you. I was changing because of you. You shaped the man I could be by giving me a mirror that didn't lie. The miracle was you kept loving when I was unlovable. The responsibility was mine to not squander that miracle. So now my life's architecture includes walls and windows built around the breath you once offered me. I don't want to be the man who remembers you only on the anniversary of heartbreak. I want to be the man who remembers you in the middle of ordinary Tuesdays. Baby, this is where I leave nothing unsaid. I've walked you through the silence, through the shame, through the slow repair and the steady promises. And now, standing here at the end of this message, I want you to hear me without a filter, without hesitation, without anything in the way. I choose you. I choose you not as a moment, not as a phase, not as a secret memory, but as the living truth that remade me. All the doors I once left open for fear to walk in, I've closed them. All the rooms where your name was left undefended, I've filled them with clarity. All the places where my silence betrayed you, I've given my voice back to you. Baby, I've stopped being a man who loves in theory and started being a man who loves in practice. Every word here, every paragraph I've spoken like a heartbeat is my evidence. And if my life is the only proof you ever need, then let it be consistent, steady, unshaken. Because love, real love, isn't just what two people feel in private. It's what survives the public storms. It's what keeps standing when the gossip runs wild. It's what rebuilds even when the foundation cracked. Baby, we are not just a story that ended. We are a testimony, a light, a reminder to anyone watching that love is still worth fighting for, even after mistakes, even after silence, even after storms. So if you're listening right now, if you've made it all the way to this moment, I want to leave you with this. Don't ever let the world convince you that love isn't worth the risk. Don't ever let fear trick you into silence. Don't ever let convenience rob you of something eternal. If you still believe in the sacred, if you still believe in redemption, if you still believe that love can rebuild even what was shattered, type it in the comments. Write, I still believe, and let the world know faith still lives here. And before I close, I need to speak from my heart to those who've been standing with me, supporting, believing, and giving back in ways that humble me to my core. Yesterday, 2 amazing souls sewed into this space at Rosasil 6,991 with an unbelievable $100.00 super thanks. Your love, your support, your sacrifice doesn't just go unnoticed. It inspires this whole community. You remind us that these words are not just videos. They are lifelines, healing spaces, sacred ground where hearts connect. Baby, to everyone listening, if this message touched your spirit, if it healed something inside you, or if you simply believe this love is worth protecting, consider sowing a seed into this mission through super thanks. Every gift, every offering, every act of support fuels more messages, more healing, more reminders to the world that love still wins. It keeps this channel alive, it pushes these words further, and it tells the universe that hope is not gone. So if you feel led, give. Not because you have to, but because you believe in what we're building here. And if you do, know this. I'll speak your name with gratitude in the next message. I'll honor your seed, and I'll keep pouring everything I have into creating spaces where broken hearts find their way back to love. To at Rosasil 6,991, to Elizabeth Frazier, and to every single soul who's ever clicked that super thanks button. Thank you. You're not just supporters, you are partners in this mission. And together, we're proving that love is not dead. So until the next one, baby, keep the door closed to the noise. Keep your heart open to the truth. And remember this, love defends, love rebuilds, and love never leaves you the same. If this message spoke to you, Type, "I still believe" in the comments. Hit the super thanks if you feel called to support this journey. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, because the next message might be the one your heart has been waiting for. See you soon, baby, and until then, stay strong, stay faithful, and never forget, you are worth being chosen out loud.